Welcome to Bringing Diverse Tech Talent to Government, Strengthening the Pipeline. I hope that's the session you hope to join. If it's not, please do consider sticking around, though, because you may have landed here just because you needed to be here. So I just want to welcome you to Code for America's fantastic summit that has been happening thus far. I'm excited to bring you all into this conversation. My name is Andreen Soley. I'm the director of the Public Interest Technology Program at New America. From here, henceforth, I will say PIT. PIT for us is about using your technical skills and knowledge to generate and develop public goods and services to better the lives of our communities. For us, we're not just doing technology for technology's sake. We really want to make sure that people's lives are improved as best as possible. Today's panelists are members of our 48-member strong university network, which is focused on building the interdisciplinary field of PIT on their respective campuses, as well as across the entire US and even globally. More news on that in the future. We accept members into our network each fall, and you can learn more about our programming at pitcases.org. The application cycle will be opening very soon. So if you're a university who's interested in the work that we are doing based on the conversations you hear today, I'm excited to invite you along. Right now, we'll be exploring how universities and colleges are working to create a pipeline to bring diverse technical talent into government and the lessons they have to share with all of us. Throughout the conversation, please place your questions in the Q&A section of the platform and use the chat function to share your own experiences or observations as we are talking. So let's get started. The way we're going to proceed is that I will introduce our panelists. They will give you a brief overview of their projects, and then we'll dive into some questions. And so I'm excited to begin. Our first individual that I'd like to introduce is Chris Goranson. He is a distinguished service professor at Carnegie Mellon University. And then we have Tithi Chapate, Associate Director of Princeton Center for Information Technology Policy, and Elizabeth K. Newton, Executive Director of the OSU Battelle Center for Science, Engineering, and Public Policy at the Ohio State University John Glenn College of Public Affairs. That was quite a mouthful. I hope I did it all justice. And let's start out by having Chris give us a quick intro about his project and the work that he's been doing.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Andreen. And apologies, I didn't mean to preempt the intros. I was
It's okay.
worried about
It's okay.
not getting the slides up, but it looks like I did. So thank you.
All good.
All right. Cool. Well, thanks. I'm really happy to be here. I love this program, and I feel very honored to speak with you all. I'm Chris Goranson. I'm faculty here at Hines College, and I thought I'd talk to you about one of our courses. It's a citizen-centered policy design course for future public interest technologists, and it's one that we've been working on really building out as part of our program. The class itself really works to prepare our master's students with the skills necessary to build, design, and deploy public interest technology services and products that are centered around principles of human-centered design, following an agile methodology, and ultimately deliver a minimum viable product for high-impact results. The class itself, it's only 7 weeks, but we do a lot in 7 weeks. We partner real student teams with real world partners, usually government agencies or nonprofits, to work on a problem together. The students are usually ultimately in charge of executing a plan to understand and to solve some aspect of a challenging problem. As part of that, they conduct weekly demos, user interviews, and conduct design and prototyping sessions. The teams are then responsible for delivering a final MVP at the end of the course. And part of my goal in setting up the class was to bring some of the strategies that I learned during my time as a Presidential Innovation Fellow and also at 18F and used by other, obviously, digital service teams into the classroom experience. I ran the numbers yesterday. That's kind of the first time that I actually looked across the last 3.5 years. And I was actually kind of surprised by how much we've done since then. We've had 122 master's students go through the class, and we've worked with 23 external partners since the first class was launched in spring of 2019. That has actually resulted in 35 projects or MVPs. During this time, some of the topics that we've taken are shown there on the left. And the breakdown of our partners of the course is about 20% federal government partners, 20% state, 26% local government, and then about 34% are nonprofit or other. One of the great things that the experiences that I had this past year was that I was able to engage with CMU's excellent program. It's a Provost's Inclusive Teaching Fellows program. And as part of that, I was really interested in building out other aspects of the class that would essentially help create the space both in the classroom and with our community partners to better account for differences in backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. So over the past year, I've been working with the folks at the Eberly Center that runs the program on behalf of the Fellows Program here at CMU to explore a number of different topics. And so these were just some of these things. What you're looking at is essentially the year-long breakdown of the program by module. And so I worked with the team to integrate some of these moving forward. We learned actually a lot through the process. One was that in the current earlier design, we needed a better diversification of examples, better ways to incorporate individual approaches and backgrounds into how to work together, both as a team as well as to work with a partner. And so we've been incorporating some of our tools like early course feedback mechanisms and other conflict resolution exercises to help build the teams, in terms of their empathy. So it's been very exciting for me. So I think I've got about 20 seconds left, so I'm going to stop. All to say that everything that I'm talking about, the class itself is actually an open source resource that's available at pickcases.org. So if you happen to be in academia and this is something that you'd like to experiment with, you can certainly see all the class resources that I have available on the pickcases.org website, or you can check out our website just to learn a little bit about our fellowship program that builds onto the back half of the class. And I think I'm at time, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Chris. That was very thorough. Appreciated. We're going to move to Tiffy.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say if you're probably expecting my colleague Mihir Shishir, who actually leads the program that I'm going to talk about. He was going to be here, but his flight got canceled and he got delayed, so I'm filling in for him. But I'll do my best. I do co-lead this program with him, so I'll do my best in sort of sharing more about this program that we have at Princeton University. So the program that we've been running, it's been running for the last 3 years. We started this right when the pandemic started. The program's called the Public Interest Technology Summer Fellowship. Short, we call it the PITSF program, and the program sort of aimed at rising juniors and seniors who want to get a firsthand experience working in technology and policy across federal, state, and local government. We typically have about 16 to 20 students from universities across the Public Interest Technology University Network be part of the program. And what's different about this program is that a lot of other projects good projects are geared towards helping government use data and technology to deliver services to constituents. This project sort of explores a slightly different area. We sort of look at how we can tap into expertise of young technical-minded students to help government develop policies around the use of data and technology by either the private sector or by government agencies as well. So that's actually the focus of this program. And this program usually begins with a virtual bootcamp. We started right when the pandemic started, so we started off with a virtual program. So we've kept the virtual bootcamp where the students come in. We have a virtual bootcamp where we go through sort of sessions where they learn a lot about law, policy, and technology. We have computer scientists, we have people from government come and give their brief lectures on different topics. And then the students go off into their 8-week fellowships with host organizations at the federal level, state level, as well as the local level. Organizations that have been part of, that have hosted our students include organizations like the Federal Trade Commission, the CFPB, different mayor's offices, attorney general's offices. And the projects that the students work on are very varied. At the state level, they work on cases related to competition and privacy with respect to big tech. At the local level, they have worked on developing policies around civic participation, delivering broadband benefits, and designing innovative programs, even around COVID tracking and technology solutions. So they worked on a wide range of programs. At the federal level, a lot of the projects that they work on involve decision-making, consumer protection, decision-making around loans and finances. So a lot of them work on fair lending models and so on. So that's broadly the different kinds of projects that the students work on when they go on their fellowships. But one other thing that's distinct about the fellowship is while they go off on their sort of different fellowships, the whole cohort goes off on their different fellowships with different host organizations, we continue a weekly sort of session with our cohort where they come back every week and we check in with them and they share their experiences, they talk about their challenges, the things that have been successes, and we do even on a weekly basis bring in guest speakers that can guide them through some of these challenges. So it's not like we just send them off on their fellowships and they're just on their own after that. They do come back on a weekly basis, and again, the virtual format really helped us do that a little bit. So they do come back and we do check in with them every week, and they have sort of mentorship every week from us during their fellowship program. So once they're done with their 8-week fellowship program, they come back, they debrief with us, and we also do invite other cohorts back at the debriefing session. And the goal of that is to actually build this network where these students and these young professionals can guide each other as they sort of start building their careers in public interest tech or public interest tech and public service. We do want them to build this cohort and maybe even come back and guide future cohorts once they've made it. So we do bring back, we bring back other cohorts that have gone through this program. So that's broadly the program that we've been working for the last 3 years.
Thanks, Tithi. Elizabeth, can you give us a little brief review of what you've been working on?
Technical difficulties, who would know? Okay, thank you for the opportunity to share. OSU Patel Center is running a program called the Ohio Public Interest Fellows Program. This is our inaugural summer for this program, and it is actually an outgrowth of a class that we teach called Rapid Innovation for Public Impact. It's a course we've been running since 2019. We've served more than 150 graduate, undergraduate students on 43 projects sponsored by government and nonprofit agencies. And the response was so wonderful from the students to this. They wanted to continue their engagement in the public sector. So they were looking for work experience and just more of a professional setting. And so we devised the Ohio Public Interest Fellows Program to try to feed this appetite and then also to expand it. So in effect, we're partnered at Ohio State with Case Western University as well as Cleveland State University to grow what I would call connective tissue between state government offices and academia. And we're doing this by recruiting and selecting and placing graduate level STEM students in a summer internship effectively with state government offices, either legislative or executive branch. So our desire is to actually promote the habit of state government and academia working together on hard problems, but at the same time, inspiring STEM students to public service. So our program, our fellows program, runs 12 weeks over the summer. The first 2 weeks are actually involved in orienting the students to Columbus, Ohio, to State House grounds, to the executive offices, but also training them. And so we have, I would say, probably 10 total days of training, professional skills development, basic literacy as it relates to public affairs, because of course we can't take for granted that, of course, they understand how Ohio state government functions. And also just kind of building what I would call self-efficacy, the self-awareness associated with their preferences are and what types of differences there are between perhaps culture as it's reflected in the scientific method versus, say, political culture or policy-making culture. So those are very distinct, and we try to surface all this in the beginning so that they are set up for success through the summer. Now, we stay in touch with them weekly while they're working with the host offices, but all of this wouldn't be possible without the partnerships that we have forged. It's not only the 3 large Ohio universities that we're working together. We intentionally worked through the communication channels that are intrinsic across Ohio in career services, utilizing the shared tool called Handshake so that we could recruit students from any Ohio higher education institution to attract them to this program. And so this inaugural cohort of fellows, we actually are hosting students who are not from Case, not from Cleveland, not from Ohio State. Really excited about this. I think this brings such a diversity of talent and views and backgrounds among these summer fellows. Internally, a lot of these relationships where we're placing the students in these host offices, we have some of them already in OSU Patel Center by virtue of our Rapid Innovation course, but we are also a unit within the Glenn College of Public Affairs, which serves the continuing education needs of state government officials since we're right here in Columbus, Ohio. So we have this vast network that we have leveraged on behalf of all of Cleveland State and Case to bring the best opportunities forward in terms of host offices. So we've worked very closely both with the college and the people that are running those professional development programs, but also OSU's government affairs team. And they are very well versed in the state government and know the people and the players. And so they were invaluable guides to ensuring that it is going to be a positive experience, both for the students and for the host offices. And of course, we have also a very close relationship with a nonpartisan part of the Ohio legislature called the Legislative Services Commission. So those partners have been invaluable in our launch, and we're really excited. The host offices are very excited as well. And as far as what the students are doing, they're bringing their coding skills, their data analytics skills, their analytical models, their deep background in the disciplines that are both shaping and shaped by the public policy. And of course, the fellows being more recently in their studies and in their books than, say, someone like me, they're bringing new ways of thinking and new ways of approaches that might be out of reach of their host offices. I imagine Ohio's like many state governments, and budgets are not flush, and it's difficult to hire. So I would say the state government workforces are highly constrained, and they're really over the moon about having this graduate level talent to help in their offices. So with that, I actually would just take one more minute to give you a sense of the diversity of both students and their backgrounds and the host offices. I thought I would just share with you our 6 inaugural fellows. So one of the ones from Case is a PhD in chemical engineering. She is placed with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, specifically working a project in the Division of Environmental and Financial Assistance, Office of Compliance and Pollution Prevention. We have a PhD in Industrial Systems Engineering from Ohio State, who'll be working closely in Ohio Department of Transportation with its strategic group called Drive Ohio and Fly Ohio, which is the vanguard of the state of Ohio's efforts to be the preferred place for smart mobility, whether it's air or ground based. We have a PhD in molecular genetics joining Ohio Department of Natural Resources to work on water restoration projects. We have a PhD in biology, psychology, and neuroscience from Bowling Green University, who is joining Ohio Department of Education, specifically the Office of Approaches to Teaching and Learning, so STEM education. Our Cleveland State University student is working on his master's in mathematics and is joining the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, specifically to work on the Ohio Human Services Data Warehouse. And then finally, our last Ohio State student is a PhD evolution, ecology, and organismal biology student working with Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, specifically in the Division of Surface Water. So the domains are vast, But I think that the relationships and the groundwork that we've laid and the diversity of talent and their currency with techniques around AI, machine learning, data visualization, other things, financial analysis, these are going to be invaluable for the state of government. And as I just close to say, the goal is that this is just the first start on the connective tissue. So I hope that we continue to kind of grow in organically this mesh to create a stronger state.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for that. What's really useful for me about listening to you all describe your respective programs is the full range of students. You're going from undergraduate to graduate students. And that is something that I know this group really cares about in terms of how do you get folks who are a little bit earlier in their journey to enter government. So can you talk to us a little bit about what has been how do we attract sort of new talent into public service? What has been resonant for your groups in terms of bringing them to the table? I'll start out with Tithi and then go back around, and love to have you all just dive in a little bit on that.
I'm happy to share that the couple of things. The one key thing that I've sort of realized through this process, not just with this program, but with some of our other programs that are directed towards a career in public service, is that students need continuous sort of mentorship and they need role models. I think that's kind of key to sort of helping them navigate this path. Having done work in government and public service myself, I know that trajectory is not quite apparent. And it's often very helpful for them to hear from others that have been in this field that it's okay to sort of go through this sort of trajectory that's not like, unlike academia or industry, it's not always you don't have clear next steps. So for them to be able to constantly get mentorship and have role models that can talk to them is, I think, key to help them navigate this. A lot of them have a thirst to do public interest work, but they are often afraid to navigate this sort of, I don't know what the next steps are. I'm not sure whether I should go into this direction. I should build a career in this sort of field. The second thing that I would say is key is sort of understanding off-ramps. And we worked a lot in sort of understanding off-ramps really well. And the reason I mentioned this is because a lot of students, even if they're interested for various reasons, choose to not pursue careers in public service. And that's okay. Maybe they have financial considerations or other things. It's important to keep in mind that we need to build back bridges. So while we work on these sort of programs to sort of enable new talent to go into these careers in public service, we're also simultaneously working on building these bridges back for people that have an interest, but for some reason cannot do it at that time. So we do work on other programs where we can bring people that have an interest in this area, but cannot do it at a particular time. We want to give people the opportunity to come back into public service roles at different stages of their career as well. So I think that's important as well.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I agree with Tithi that the exposure, the awareness of possibilities. I think it's not hard to attract, especially undergraduate students, to this, because I'm so inspired all the time with the students. They come in to the university wanting to have an impact. And so it's easy to, I think, attract them. And then the issue becomes, academically, are we structured to allow the flexibility of exploration? And of course, engineering students in particular are renowned for extremely rigid programs of study. So how do we create flexibility in that? And one of the ways that we kind of are scaffolding our programs is, we redesigned an undergraduate minor that tried to lower all the barriers to entry to this minor so that engineers are going to have the easiest time possible to take that 2000 level course as it relates to science and technology policy. And so just kind of pull them and create these easy feeders into this pipeline so that they do get that exposure. They see the role models, guest lectures or whatever it happens to be, whoever's standing in front of them in the room. So I think it's complex. So there's no one thing, no silver bullet, but we just have to try to question the degrees of freedom, and how do we keep adding degrees of freedom in the student's journey through their program of study?
Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think those are great points that Tithi and Elizabeth raise. I would agree wholeheartedly that I think, at least on our campus, there's a right now. I think honestly, like public sector is just getting out competed for a lot of our best students. We're a public. Hines is kind of interesting in the sense it's a public policy school and an IS school, so we tend to get. I mean, people are at Hines partially because they care about public institutions and about government and service. But if all they're hearing about are opportunities, from top companies, Fortune 500 firms, and they're seeing these enticing offers in year one, it's really hard to turn that down. And so, I think one of the things that we've realized is that there's a really big gap between finding the opportunities in government, knowing where to look, and then, getting the students to see those as opportunities that they could really play a role in. So, I mean, I guess one ask that I'd have for a number of folks that are in this session is that if you're in public service, like find a way to talk about what you're doing outside of government. I know that sometimes it becomes a little bit like you're in your own kind of bubble in the sense that what you're doing, of all the cool stuff you're doing, your colleagues know of all the cool stuff you're doing, but outside of that, like we can't see it. And I think that if we can see more in terms of the great work that you're doing to really innovate government, then that's inspiring for future students. And if you have any involvement in the hiring process at all, like get involved and find ways to actively recruit, get on campuses, talk to the students, show them where the opportunities are, help them navigate platforms like USA Jobs. I mean, these are critical things because, the students are overwhelmed, they're burdened, they're already having to make a lot of decisions just to get through the graduation process. So, if you can just show, shine a light on where those opportunities are in government and help, I guess kind of point them in the right direction, that goes a huge way. And that's actually where we've seen a lot of our students out of the lab both get excited through the partner engagement. So learning like actually they can do really great work within government. And now they have a contact in government. And now maybe there's a real job opportunity there. That's I think just a great way to really build the future generation that's going to do this work, into government down the road.
Well, I mean, I think one of the great things is a place like this, right? At the summit, you can see a variety of work that's happening within government. And this already allows you to sort of make the key point. One of the things I want to sort of take a deeper dive in is the session says bringing diverse talent. And for me, diverse means having an equity lens. And so I'm curious, I know, Chris, you mentioned it at the start. So I think I want to start with you, of really making sure that you are bringing an equity lens to the work that you're doing, both in terms of representations of students, but also just the conceptualization of the problems that people are trying to solve. So curious to hear all of you talk about what that means when we see something like bringing diverse talent to government. How do we sort of expand that frame a little bit? I'm gonna start with you, Chris.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, that's definitely like the $1 million question, I guess that I definitely don't have the answer to. And I've been, really trying to figure out how to build at least a classroom experience that helps support individuals coming from a variety of different backgrounds and experiences. And I think at least on our campus, it's compounded by the fact that for a lot of our students, like US government is new as well. And that a lot of the ways in which, I'm, I guess, used to talking about these topics is largely unfamiliar. Everything from the experience of working with a government agency to certainly understanding what that engagement looks like with the US lens. So one of the things that I've been working really hard to do is to figure out how to build better engagement strategies, better ways within the classroom environment to be open to all voices, all experiences, to make sure, it's critical, for example, on our teams, that the teams meld and form ways of working quickly. Otherwise, they can't be effective. And that then, has to translate down to being able to show empathy during, user interviews or working with the partner, understanding really what that problem is that you're trying to solve. So one of the great things that I learned through the fellowship program was just real concrete, tangible ways to build some of those considerations into everything from like our course rubrics to the ways we engage in the classroom to the way we talk about certain topics, and making sure that there's a diversity of thoughts, opinions represented in our speakers and an example cited. And that's helped, but it's definitely a journey and it's a hard one. And it also requires us to be very thoughtful about how we communicate that also with the partner, so that we are thinking about everyone that's affected by a government product or services. I would say that that's been one of the great aspects of the Pitt UN network, is that, you know, there's so many great examples of how better DEI considerations can be built within the classroom that we can learn from. That's one way in which I think the network has been really successful in at least bolstering, you know, the ability of folks like myself who are trying to teach some of the Pitt content in a way that hopefully, you know, brings more voices to the table. But it's definitely been it's hard, I guess, is I guess in there. It's been challenging, but worth every minute, obviously.
I mean, I appreciate you saying that it's a complex and challenging issue. And actually, I want to just pull something in from the Q&A because I think it's somewhat related here. Someone says, I'm hearing the recurring theme of the need for insider connections, social capital, and privilege financially and academically in order to be able to participate in government. How are y'all accommodating for the cost of folks' intersectionalities to help people overcome those needs where lived experience is absolutely necessary to be able to transform some of the systems in each of your work? I'm just bringing that back in because I think it is connected to the diverse talent piece, and I want to connect the dots a little bit more there. So Tithi, you're probably going to take that on quickly, but I'll come back around to you too, and then Elizabeth.
I can give a very obvious answer to this that we've tried to incorporate, not just with this program, but pretty much all our programs, is to eliminate financial barriers wherever possible. So even this program and every other program that we actually support, we try to make sure no student has to say no to an opportunity because of financial considerations. So we try to make sure they're fully paid internships, their travel's covered, things like that. So that's very maybe a simple answer, but I think it's important to make sure that at least that is taken care of. But with our projects in general, I think our niche is basically working on issues around the use of technology and policies around the use of technology. The students themselves work on issues around equity, fairness, and inclusion, right? So the projects themselves are sort of have that equity lens in it. But I do think we're doing two things with this program. I know part of it is our program and trying to bring sort of diverse students to the program. And I would say we're doing that. One of the reasons we're able to do that is because of the Public Interest Technology University Network. As Princeton alone, it would be very hard for us to recruit from all these different universities. And I think that's key for us because the more we are able to recruit students from that have different life and educational experience, we're able to sort of build this culture of inclusion very early on. We're able to have an environment where dissent and differences in background sort of enrich our programming. So, and that we are able to do only because we're able to sort of reach out to these other universities in the network. So on one hand, we are sort of bringing in diversity and equity to the program, but I would also say we're bringing in diversity and equity to sort of government because it's, you know, these young students that come in bring with them diverse experiences that a lot of existing people in government don't have, right? So they come from various different backgrounds. A lot of people, a lot of these digitally native, they're how they're
I want to make sure. Is that okay?
Also doing, they're also.
Tithi, I think you're having a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm just going to go to Elizabeth and come back to you, and hopefully things will be a little bit more sorted. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Hopefully the tech gremlins don't come for me next. And just as Tithi and Chris have noted, I think part of this is where and how are you recruiting your students, and are there financial barriers to participation? And thanks to the funding from Public Interest Technology University Network, the Ohio Public Interest Fellows are paid a very competitive stipend, and I mean competitive relative to what STEM summer internships are like, not public affairs internships even, right? Because if we're going to bring STEM talent to these problems, then we have to kind of be able to compete against the industry offers that they might receive. So I think that it's one aspect is just eliminate the financial hurdle for students to say yes. And then, as I mentioned, recruiting across the whole fabric of Ohio's higher education institution, looking at minority serving institutions, HBCUs, making it an all or welcome in higher ed. It just happens that Ohio State led the Case and Cleveland State team to start this, but this isn't where we want to end. And then on the project side, the host offices or the innovation challenges, most of those actually have an equity aspect to them. Even Department of Transportation, they're worried about access to the employment opportunities. The pollution, compliance, surface water quality. I think all of us are familiar with environmental racism. And, so these state offices are already focused on this. It's not, how are we going to serve the latest, greatest suburban development? It's how do we help all of Ohio's citizenry benefit from the public infrastructure? And how do we make this an attractive place for all people to live and work? So some of it is baked in, but I think it's just this continual attention to it. And then reaching out and beyond our own campus borders to find those partners. And bring them to the table to shape and help design what we're doing. I think that that's also critical, not to presume that we know how best to eliminate barriers to diversity, to diversification, I guess.
So
Andreen, I think we can hear you, even though it looks like the icon.
Okay, good. Oh, good to know, because I was trying to figure that out. We're having a little technical difficulties, but we'll move around it. I think the conversation is really helpful, and I want to promise that I haven't told anyone to talk about the university network, but I think it is really important to understand that we have to have building a community of folks who have the frame and equity frames helps. It helps to know who your go-to will be. And so one of the things I'm curious about, because you mentioned it, Elizabeth, and I'd love to hear Chris talk about this, is your partners. How did you begin to navigate that space? Because I think you've all said it, that partners are essential to this work. And even Jonathan's question in the chat around kind of social capital and recognizing that there are sort of these insider relationships that kind of make this work move. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to establish relationships with your current partners and what has been the most challenging piece, and maybe some tips for folks who are thinking about doing that?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I think that's the hardest part of the class that I teach, is finding partners to work with. And we've worked with some of the largest cities in the U.S. We've also worked with very, very small rural municipalities. So I think in terms of like accessibility, we actually benefit from a diversity of experiences, because from like a selfish perspective, that leads to very valuable learning experiences within the classroom. And again, the hope with all of the things that we come out of the class with is that we end up with an open source MVP that can be repurposed by others, right? So we do what we can to make that as accessible in terms of what the students are working on. But I'd say that's always the challenge from our perspective, is finding partners to work with, and especially partners that I think understand that we will talk to users of products and services. We will conduct user research. We will work with them side by side as opposed to for them. And so, the focus really is on understanding what the users of government products and services actually need. And oftentimes there's disagreement at the end about what the students actually produce and about maybe what the partner thought they were getting. And that's not unusual or uncommon, I think, within digital service design. And so we certainly welcome that. But I think from our perspective, one of the other hurdles that we have is very similar to all of you working in digital service environments, which is that we have to educate the partners as well as we go. That yes, these will be open source artifacts, that yes, we will talk to real users, that yes, the students are going to be heavily engaged with you. No, they're not just going to do what you say. So, but I guess so all that to say that, like, if this is something that you'd like to get involved in, or of a good product or service, please talk to us. And likewise, if you have, or you have an association with the university and this is the kind of thing that you'd like to see on your own campus, like, for example, the class I teach is all open source. So all the materials are available, and that's, again, been empowered through the network. One of the things that I really love about UN too is, like, and I think their current and future funding rounds, that they require future funding partners to also to consider equity and inclusiveness in terms of other universities that they partner with, and that helps broaden out the exposure as well. And so I think those are all positive steps, I think, in terms of making sure that we're bringing, I think, the right people to the table as we talk about public interest technology, and certainly how it's taught in the classroom.
Tithi, you're back, and so I want to give you a chance to finish your thought, and then also piggyback on some of the things that Chris is talking about.
So I actually don't know where I left off, because I was talking and I went off. So but I will talk about this particular question that you have about how do we sort of work with our partner organizations, and how do we sort of recruit our partners. And I will say some of it is those connections that we ourselves have made. And I think this brings us back to the thing that Elizabeth was talking about, just having this connective tissue, work between academia and government. I think that's critical. And we try to do that at all levels in order to be able to do this successfully. We do that with our research. We try to have research and other projects where we sort of work closely with people in government and public service. We have several projects where we sort of work closely with government, but we also like having sort of this movement of talent between academia and government. And that really helps us build those connections in these host organizations. A lot of us that are at work in this program have come from government. We have students that go back and work in government. So it's important to have that flow of people that go between academia and government and work together. I think that has been critical in sort of building these connections, and sort of and you also then understand what kind of work they do. You know that they're working on public interest technology problems. They're working on issues around the use of working on policies around the use of technology and data. So I think it's important to have that connection.
Elizabeth, you mentioned something at the start in your presentation, which I think is somewhat connected here. And you were talking about sort of the different cultures that you had to expose students to, because of, what you're bringing from the classroom is fundamentally going to be different than how things are operating in government. Want to talk a little bit more, would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that, particularly in terms of how you're talking to partners about being open to the kinds of things students are going to be bringing.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, it's always a challenge, multifaceted. I think, like most of you, we onboard our sponsors, we hold their hands through the process, we check in with them kind of at the midpoint, just to help manage expectations. And so expectation setting and doing it continually through the engagement, I think, is really important, because there is this need to translate between their world, that the scientific technical world, and people are trained to think very analytically, and let's go find all the evidence and let's analyze data. But, in the pragmatic reality, and I've been a civil servant, so I know, right? You only have so much time. You're not going to make it an academic research project. You just need the best data and make the best decision with the time you have available to you. And so there's a pragmatism and there's a speed that maybe the students aren't used to because they've been in a student mode. So helping folks appreciate the different ways of working, but also I think, a political sensibility and even a policy culture and sensibility, those are very different than scientific method. And, it's not just a question of if only scientists could talk more clearly about their subject matter, then we would get better policy. It's like, no, policy making happens through horse trading, negotiation, relationships matter, weighing the constituency's interests. These are very illogical things. And we just have to be prepared to value both ways and processes and help the students understand, like, okay, there's a limit to which a very scientific technical approach is going to work. And so just developing an appreciation of the cultural differences, I think it's part of its training, part of it is hand-holding the host office. And so there's coaching on both sides of it, I would say.
I have to dive into this a little bit, and I saw Chris shaking his head, so I'm going to ask you, Chris, to talk a little bit about this. But I think the preparation for the student side is helpful, right? I mean, we've been seeing and talking about public interest technology. We've been saying that word out casually, but for us, we think about it as an interdisciplinary endeavor, right? We think about this fluency issue that we talk about, multiple fluent translation are terms that we're using, because we're recognizing that those are fundamentally different spaces, and we've got to figure out what that special node is. And so, Chris, I want to talk to you a little bit about sort of that prep work that Elizabeth is talking about, because your students are working very closely to create a final product. Can you talk a little bit about how you navigate that tension?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I think it's a great point. So we run into issues, I think, on both sides. So we run into issues, having to, I think, reset students' expectations in terms of the power that they have in these engagements, and how, like, their ideas and how their willingness to talk to real people really carries a lot of potential weight in terms of how they're able to move the project forward. So I think, like, one of the things that I've realized is, because our class is only 7 weeks, we benefit from students that are coming sometimes from different backgrounds or disciplines. Certainly, if they've already got some foundation in, say, human-centered design, they can help mentor and coach other students. It's just such a different way of thinking that within the 7 weeks, it really requires pretty much a hard pivot against a lot of kind of built-in expectations, especially if the students have previously worked in, say, a management consulting role or something. So that's always a challenge. One of the things that we stood up with the work of previous fellows was something called the policy. It's like a policy innovation handbook. It's sort of like a playbook, basically, of it kind of tips and tricks on how to be effective as quick as possible. And it was modeled after some of the other playbooks that were stood up by digital service firms. So that's been one thing that's helped a lot. And then certainly on the partner engagement piece, there's as I think Elizabeth kind of alludes to, there's a lot of work that we have to do before the class begins to set expectations, to help them understand the process, what it's going to look like, what open source means, all these things. And it's all the same discussions that, the digital service team has to have with the partner, so that they understand exactly really what they're getting into. But when we're successful there, then it means that we can move rapidly towards some ideation, towards something that hopefully begins to solve some problem that was, really brought to light by talking to people, real people that were affected by a particular issue. But that's definitely not easy. It's always an ongoing challenge. And even when people say they understand, a lot of times they don't. And it's like, there's a difference between, in theory, agreeing with the concept of something like human-centered design and then seeing it and what it means, right? And how that changes, sometimes the power dynamic as well. And so, yeah, it's always been an enlightening experience, but one that usually by the end ends with, most participants feeling very positive about it.
Tiffy, I just want to give you a chance to weigh in on anything that's been said by Elizabeth and Chris before I move to my next question.
I think I have similar experiences with this program. I think it's that's one of the reasons why we have not just the boot camp at the beginning, but the weekly sort of mentorship. And And we bring in people from government and people that have actually worked on these problems, so that students understand that some things have to be discreet, some things, there's a different culture around this kind of work, and they sort of understand the culture, they know how to navigate this culture, and they understand why certain things are done in a certain way. So I think that kind of constant mentorship is key. And on both sides, we do work closely with the host organization as well, so they understand some of the students' way of working.
Well, I have to ask you this because I have you all here. One of the challenges that have been identified is this idea that, and you all are hitting it, which is, how do you get students that are leaving maybe one particular environment, like a college environment, immediately wanting to enter government? And so the question, the position has been maybe to send them to the private sector first. But I'm curious about what you see in terms of that journey, that because you've all just admitted that there's a culture to each space. What's your sense about how that could potentially play out in terms of prepping students, in terms of making sure that folks understand that there is a real difference there's a difference, and it's okay that there are differences? How do you have that conversation with students around what the differences are in the various spaces that they can apply their skills? Government, private sector, nonprofit. How do you sort of navigate that conversations with students? Chris, you're nodding. Maybe I'll start with you and then hit Tithia and then go to Elizabeth.
Sure. I mean, I guess the word that kind of pops in my mind is impact. I mean, that I think gets students really excited, knowing that they can. I mean, that's why that's why they're there, right? I mean, you don't go to I don't think you don't go to a public policy IS school unless you do want to make a difference. And maybe I'm being naive, but I think that's one of the attractors. And so, showing them, yeah, you can really help change things. Here's a way to do it. Here's some ways to engage. I think the other thing too is getting people out of this idea that government has to be forever, right? You don't have to work for government for the rest of your life. You can work for a couple of years if you still, or same vice versa. Like if you want to work for a top company or something somewhere, you can do that. You can transfer into government, but I think having the experience, having the impact, and I think the scale that you can do good work at government is something you just can't find anywhere else. You just can't, and not with the same range of freedom and real ability to impact change. I think like there's just no other place to do it in government. So I think presenting those as opportunities, again, I think where things break down though, is that has to translate then into real jobs that people can find and apply for, and that actually translate into those roles. And if that link is broken, and usually it is, then that's where even your most ambitious, earnest public servant it's going to be very hard to turn down an offer from somewhere else.
I'm going to go to Elizabeth because I think I've gotten you trapped a few times, Tithi. So I'll go to Elizabeth and then come back to you.
No, I love what Chris said. And I'm reflecting on, we need to help students at all levels appreciate that their professional satisfaction and the richness of their career is going to be maximized if they think of this as more of a fluid set of possibilities. And we do actually intentionally bring, for lack of a better word, non-academics in to talk directly with our student communities. And we always ask them, how did you land in your current place? And their stories are varied, but all of them involve the meandering and winding and the pivots. And it helps lower the stress levels of the students who are like, oh, I'm not a failure because I don't know exactly what I want to be when I graduate. And so just exposure to the fact that most of us have very interesting and diverse backgrounds. And sometimes it's in government, sometimes it's in industry, sometimes it's in nonprofit. And to almost normalize that, go where you have the greatest sense of purpose for the time being. And that may change over time. And it's okay that it actually changes and evolves over time. So I think it's taking away that myth that careers are straight lines, point A to point B. And it's like, no, you're going to be an incredible asset. The more diverse experience you have, spend a little time in a nonprofit. Employers are going to value that. They're going to know that you've just got a different set of experience, or go work in government. Companies will value that. So I think it's kind of maybe changing the myth, or, trying to bring the myth down?
I want to also encourage anyone listening. If you have questions, please do drop them in the Q&A section. I'm seeing some open source sessions. I want to observe that I saw the chat that someone said, students need to be able to have the opportunity to come to a place like CFA and access the experience. I'm looking forward to that because we actually made this available to some of our students virtually as well as in person. So I'm eager to hear what students have thought about this experience and make a bid for something really something on target like that next year with the university network to send cohorts of students to this event. So please do drop some questions in the chat if you have any for us. And Tithi, any sort of remarks that you have piggybacking on Elizabeth's point about the value of seeing this as not a straight line?
Yeah, and I really agree with that. And Andrew, and I've shared this with you that we are also building programs where we enable that, right? So we sort of try to give our students exposure to both like careers in government, careers in the private sector while they are going through their undergraduate programs or their graduate programs. But even after that, if they're not sure, we want them to have the opportunity to sort of come back and explore. So recently we did launch this is a new program called the Emerging Scholars Program, where we were surprised at the number of applicants we got from people that are in the private sector that want to make their way back into a career in government. And they were not fully sure. They were not sure if they would be able to sort of shift and sort of be able to sort of, like you said, there's a difference in culture. The problems are slightly different. And this program basically gives them the opportunity to explore that for 2 years. So we are consciously thinking about how to build other programs that can help people that have gone through a different journey come back in or shift their course. And I think that's important, to build programs that help people shift sort of their journeys and shift their sort of career trajectories as well.
I think I want to say that that's probably one of the things I'd want our group to take. I'm aware that we're coming to time, so I want to maybe have you all do a final round of quick, one takeaway that you'd like anyone listening who has an interest in either replicating the work that you're doing or any inspiration that you want to provide. But I do want to say that I think it's really important for folks to understand this notion of the winding path. Particularly because we're dealing with students who sometimes feel as if they have to make a decision that is going to last for a long time. And so thanks for reiterating that. I think there's also some value in understanding that there are opportunities to learn about different work cultures that you can bring to your experiences as a student. So lightning round so that we can get you all out of here on time. I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth. What's one takeaway that you hope anyone listening takes from this session?
Okay, my hope is that everyone feels inspired to themselves get out of their office and go make a contact and go talk to, whether it's someone in government or a nonprofit, and just make yourself known that you have an interest in it. I know it's hard to overcome the inertia, but we had a blank sheet of paper not that long ago, and it's getting out of our own bubble. And I've always found such a welcoming reception. I mean, so despite my introversion, once they get out of the comfort zone, it's like, wow, there's so many people that think the same way or hope the same thing. And we can do things together that is impossible if we just stay cloistered. So that's my hope for everyone.
Let's go, Chris, and then we'll end with you, Tiffy.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say if you're in government, talk about your work. Get out of the office, go to meetings, go to places where people aren't familiar with what you're doing, can learn about what you're doing. I think that's a great way to help recruit. If you're not in government, or if you want to be in government, build a portfolio. We talk a lot in the class about show, don't tell. Like, build some examples of what you can do. I think that's critical towards really communicating the value of this work.
Yeah. I will agree with both Chris and Elizabeth, but I would say the thing that for me is for someone that wants to build a program like this, continuous mentorship. Mentorship just does not stop with having a course, but like continuous mentorship, introducing students to role models, and also paying attention to those off ramps. I think those are the things that I would want people to take away.
Well, we have reached the end. Thank you so much for joining me and my fellow panelists for bringing diverse tech talent to government session. This has been wonderful. I also want to communicate to you that if you've been inspired by anything here, you can reach out to us at pitcases.org. We can arrange for you to be speakers in some of the courses, mentors to Tithi's program, and also opportunities to partner with any of our members who have an automatic insight and excitement for public interest tech work. And so thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day. And be sure to click on the people's button and go and meet with some other folks virtually as well as if you're out in the world. So thank you all so much. Take care. And it's been wonderful to talk to you about public interest technology.